My favorite thing about Penn State tailgating is getting everybody together and joining together and in the spirit of Penn State. Everybody cheers that Penn State is the most spirited university ever.
Welcome back to the Blue White Tailgate Show, and it's time for one of my favorite segments, the recruiting block. And I get to sit in this week with the doctor, Dr. Phil. Phil, Penn State, very active in Big Ten recruiting. Take us through what's going on in terms of Penn State and in the Big Ten.
You know, it's a very solid class at this point. Penn State has. They have the #2 class in the Big Ten, right behind Michigan. They have 16 verbal commitments, and Penn State's really doing a good job at this point. I'll tell you, right now the Big Ten really is falling behind a little bit to some of the other schools. You know, when you get to a national level. But right now, besides Penn State, who's ranked who's ranked second in the Big Ten, Ohio State's ranked third, and they're ranked only about like 27th in the country. And then you got following them up is Wisconsin and Purdue. And probably Purdue is probably the biggest surprise right now in Big Ten recruiting. I don't remember the last time they had a top 5 recruiting class at this point in the recruiting season. But right now they have 17 verbal commitments, and Rivals.com says 17 of those guys are all 3-star recruits.
Now take us through the national scene. I know there's been a lot going on there. So take us through like the top 5. Sure. Give us a little breakdown there.
Mac Brown probably still deserves the moniker Mr. February. He has a top class right now in the country with 18 verbal commitments. Florida State's really doing very, very well. They're ranked #2 in the situation. They have 16 verbal commitments. Michigan has really done a superb job. As we said, they're #1 in the Big Ten, but they're 3rd in the Rivals.com top 10 at this point. They have 23 verbal commitments, and they only have 1 more scholarship to give. But the real message in the Rivals top 10 is the SEC. 5 SEC schools, John, are ranked in the top 10. You got Florida #4, you got Alabama #5, you got LSU #6, and then you got Texas A&M, who's just going to join the SEC next year into the #7 position, and then Auburn rounds it out at the #10. And the Big Ten struggling a little bit because Michigan's #3, Penn State's #18, but they're the only 2 Big Ten teams ranked in the Rivals top 25.
Great. So Texas A&M already getting that bounce, not even joined the SEC yet. But now for Penn State, a little bit of bad news on the recruiting trail this week. Take us through that.
Yeah, well, when Penn State gets a verbal commitment, historically, they don't lose that verbal commitment for National Letter of Intent Day. But that's starting to change a little bit. This summer, Jerron Jones, my #1 rated defensive tackle in the Northeast, he's from Aquinas Institute in Rochester, New York, ended up switching from Penn State to Notre Dame. And that's a big loss. And the big surprise was this past weekend when J.J. Denman, who's #3 rated player I have in the state of Pennsylvania, ended up taking a visit to Wisconsin and changed his mind and switched from Penn State to Wisconsin. Hopefully, Penn State's not going to give up for him, but he was at the right tackle spot, a position Penn State struggled a little bit in recruiting, and that's one player they want to try and get back into the fold.
Great. Phil, thanks for the recruiting update. When we come back, Phil heads back to the desk, and he and Steve break down the Wildcats when the Blue White Tailgate returns.